Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Jason Davis, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Good music there. Music courtesy of Brian Elmore, supporter of the show. Thanks, Brian. Fantastic stuff. Clever hands by Prawn. We are live. It is Thursday. I'm excited for this show. It is jam freaking packed. It is like a U.S. national team soccer bar during a World Cup match. You can't move. Can't move. There is no room here. We have Abram Chamberlain, Mind of Abram on Twitter, soccer observer, soccer writer, who was at the Atlanta announcement yesterday. He was with the people. He wasn't inside, as far as I'm aware. He wasn't inside taking part in the media scrum. He was with the people. So I like this. This gives us a chance to get the atmosphere of what Atlanta brought yesterday as their big announcement was made about an MLS team coming to the city. We also have Thomas Floyd, Goal.com writer, who will join us to talk MLS. Last night, the New York Red Bulls got their first win of the MLS season. Yay, Red Bull season started. It's underway. Go get that supporter shoot again. We'll also have Tim Vickery. Cannot say, there's really no words to sum up Tim Vickery. You all know Tim Vickery. He'll be joining us to talk Copa Lib. I'm sure we'll verge into some Brazilian topics as well as the World Cup approaches. 57 days. 57 days until the World Cup. Less than 2 months until the World Cup. Are you aware of this? Do you feel that little tingle in your stomach? World Cup is coming. And then our friend David Cartledge will join us to talk about the Copa del Rey yesterday. It's all about Gareth Bale's goal. There's other stuff. I've seen that goal. Friends of mine on Twitter have called that goal a great youth soccer goal, which is what it was. I mean, look, Gareth Bale's speed is outstanding. It is breathtaking in some ways. But yeah, come on. That's a run really fast, kick the ball into space, run really fast. Goalkeeper, I don't know what you're doing there. But I think we'll start because we got Abram coming up in just a second. We'll start with Atlanta. And before I have to get out to get Abram on the line, my impressions of what happened in Atlanta yesterday. Now, I couldn't get a picture of the crowd. I don't know how many people were actually there to be excited about MLS coming to Atlanta. But I will say this. Give Arthur Blank a chance because the man, he seems sincere. That's the most we can ask for right now, right? Yes, he's an NFL owner. Yes, this is going to be an NFL stadium. But you listen to the guy talk. And at one point, he choked up talking about soccer passion within his family. He's clearly an extremely family-oriented guy. And his family has strong connections to the soccer community in Georgia. And he was choked up. He also said, and here's where the immediate reaction was yeah, right, I'll believe it when I see it. And I get this, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt and see where it goes. But at one point, Arthur Blank said, I promise there will never be football lines during a soccer match at the new Falcon Stadium. The crowd went wild. That's like cheap heat for the soccer community. Saying, excuse me, if it's an NFL building and you say they're not going to be soccer line or football lines, that's cheap heat. You'll get a reaction. So we'll see. We got to give them a chance. Give them a chance. It's not a perfect fit. There are reasons to be skeptical. We're going to talk to Abram about it. But for the time being, there are also reasons to believe that Arthur Blank wants to put his money where his mouth is. And he wants to live up to these lofty claims about the fans owning the team. Yes, not in a literal sense, in a figurative sense. But let's see what happens. All right, let's take a break. We got a late start today, so we don't have much time. Abram Chamberlain will join us in just a second. He was there in Atlanta on the ground as Atlanta gets their MLS franchise. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Stay right there. SoccerMorning.com to support the show. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Yes, that is Rat. That is Brian Elmore's tribute to the one and only Alexi Lalas, who apparently made a cameo on some sitcom I don't watch last night on ABC. Mixology? I have no idea what that is. But if it's got Alexi, it's got to be okay, right? I don't know. Maybe it's terrible. On the line with me now, Abram Chamberlain. You can follow him on Twitter. Mind of Abram, Abram is how you spell that. Abram, how are you, sir?
I'm a little tired.
I imagine you live in, where do you live exactly?
I live just outside of Mobile, Alabama.
Okay, so you live in Mobile or near Mobile, and you drove all the way to Atlanta for the big announcement yesterday of MLS arriving in the ATL. You were there, and as I sort of outlined, you weren't inside with the journalists asking their silly questions. You were outside with the people, and I guess I'll start there. First of all, how big was the crowd? How many people showed up to welcome MLS to Atlanta?
It was a very mixed crowd. I know when I first arrived, I was the first person there because I'm that kind of person. I was talking to the security guard beforehand, and he said they had expected anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000, but he didn't think they'd do it. I'd say at the largest point where I was there was probably 500 people there. I'd say probably anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 sort of rotated in and out of this unpaved parking lot next to the hotel where they were doing the main announcement.
Okay, now it felt like, and I watched the live feed, and I know I got some tweets from some people who were there, and I think you might have mentioned it. The presentation for the people who were not inside wasn't very good, and maybe that played a role in sort of how engaged the people outside were with the announcement.
It was the nicest way that I could put it. It sort of felt a little bit more like a home show than an announcement for a soccer team. And they constantly talking about Home Depot and Bear and the other sponsors that they were around. There was a man juggling knives at one point. I wasn't totally sure what that was about. There were constant trivia, but nothing particularly soccer related. And the two DJs that they had, who no idea where they were from, had little to no knowledge of soccer. They were doing this one thing at one point where they were trying to come up with how many of this can you name quickly, and one of the members of the audience said U.S. national team players, to which the DJ said, "You're trying to make me look stupid."
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And then, of course, he turned to me and asked me what to say, and I said, MLS MVPs. That didn't go much better.
So okay, look, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily an indictment of Atlanta's interest in this team over the long term. It is good to kind of get the picture of what that day was about. I mean, we are going to judge it, Abram, by what happened in Orlando and what we saw in Portland and Seattle and all of these other places. And I don't remember Seattle's actual announcement. I'm not sure I remember Portland's actual announcement. I clearly remember Orlando's. That's the most recent one. And it didn't live up to that at all.
Oh, not even close. I would say Orlando had it in space. First off, it appeared that everyone was invited inside,
okay,
which was a big thing. This seemed very much separated, whereas the VIPs were invited inside, and the VIPs and most of the members of Terminus Legion were invited inside. And just sort of your typical passerbyers were, it almost felt like relegated to the outside, where you had to stand outside and you got to watch the helicopter fly in, and they attempted to put it up on the big screen, but ended up with most people streaming the MLS press conference on their phones because they couldn't get it streaming on the big screen.
Okay.
The post party was pretty good. I'll give them that.
Okay.
But the actual during event party for the fans was lacking.
Well, let's say this. I mean, this was also probably much more thrown together than what happened in Orlando. We knew Orlando was coming for a long time. This all seemed to come together very quickly, even if there were rumors out there in the press that Blank was talking to MLS and it was likely to come. And, again, I mean, people are going to jump on any possible reason to doubt Atlanta, Abram, and maybe you're in that boat. I mean, there are reasons to have questions about this. I don't know if you saw anything that Arthur Blank said. I think that bodes well for what might happen with this team. But when we're talking about taking the temperature of soccer interest in Atlanta, do you think that gave a representative picture, or were there too many variables at play for a sort of thrown together announcement, given maybe a week of notice? Is that what we had? It's 5 o'clock in the It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. People are probably not even off work yet. I mean, that's part of this.
To be perfectly honest, I think that it did, and this is going to sound like me being a bit of a homer, even though I'm definitely not an Atlanta homer, but I think it boded relatively well, given all the factors that were in play, given the as you put it, thrown together nature, which it very much was, or at least felt like a thrown together sort of event. There was a decent crowd. There were, for that time of the day, for the location where it was at, which is not the most accessible location in all of Atlanta, Georgia, there was a good crowd. And as I said before, the after party had a decent crowd. There was signage, but the signage was sort of only around that one area. It did very much feel like a thrown together event, but for a thrown together event, it felt like a decent sized turnout, and I was very impressed. I know you've talked to Jason and them, but it felt like the Terminus Legion seemed like they were going to build something there. And of all the lines and all the little things that they had going, that was the longest line, was to get in and join Terminus Legion.
That's good. I mean, that kind of interest in the group that is going to be the most vocal and boisterous element of the fandom in Atlanta is a good sign. I know that there was talk that the Silverbacks were there in attendance, and we'll see how, if there any partnership develops. Blank said, our partners in soccer, or whatever he said, our professional partners, the Atlanta Silverbacks. We'll see about that. Were there Silverback fans there? Did anybody represent that element, maybe with a jersey or a scarf or something? And
I saw about 5 or 6 people with the scarves and the jerseys. There was definitely someone wearing a gorilla mask up front. I was told, I did not see him for myself, but I was told that Eric Winaldo was there. I never saw him, so I am not going to put any statement by that, though I'm sure if he was, there'd be a picture of him out someplace on Twitter. But there's a big group in Atlanta, the Atlanta Ultras, that supports the Silverbacks, and they're very much against it. And I think there's going to have to be, obviously, some sort of agreement. Otherwise, you're going to fracture that Atlanta fan base. And who knows how much fan base there actually is.
Well, yeah, I think the ultimate question is whether or not the Silverbacks can survive. And the NASL has yet to come out in any way and say what they might plan for the Silverbacks or the Silverbacks ownership, which, I mean, let's remember. And look, I mean, I'm fine with anybody being a Silverbacks fan. Go support your local team. That's great. But this is a team that was dormant for a little while, that's had some serious issues with money and everything else. That element of Atlanta's soccer culture can't be that large. And we know that MLS is going to need to draw. Atlanta MLS is going to have to draw from everybody. But I suppose it's important. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not. But is there any real sense that there's an actual partnership possible? I don't know about that.
There are rumors floating about it, like rumors meaning between the fans there, that there is going to be, and you've heard the announcement from Blank and from the like, that there's going to be some sort of agreement arrangement. I'm not sure what that will be, especially with the way that NASL seems to sort of have it out for MLS. I'm not sure how much of an agreement or how much of an arrangement there can be, and it really does seem in a lot of cases, I'm sure you've taken note of this with the Cosmos and Red Bull and NYCFC, there's that fracture of the fan base where they think NASL is doing it right and MLS is doing it wrong. And I think that a lot of the people, and the Silverbacks draw decently considering they're not in the city. They pull, 4,000 to 5,000 a game, so that's, good numbers for a lower division team. I don't know how many of those people are going to come over unless eventually, as some people rumor, Blank does end up buying out the Silverbacks. If that happens, I think that would be probably the best case scenario for all involved, because I think having the two teams together in the same city is not going to work out very well for either one of them.
The sense from the fans who attended the event, did you get the sense that these were soccer hardcores, knowledgeable people? I mean, the DJs didn't know anything, but did you get the sense that the crowd were those people, or were we talking about sort of general sports fans who are open to supporting a soccer team in Atlanta?
The vast majority of people there were soccer fans, and you judge that by the amount of European jerseys and a good amount of MLS jerseys there as well. And I didn't see a whole lot of, general, I have no idea what's going on soccer fans there. Just the casual sports fan didn't seem to show up. This seemed to be an event that attracted soccer fans in Atlanta or soccer fans in the surrounding area, or in my case, the soccer fans from Alabama, or some of the guys I was with, soccer fans from South Carolina.
Wow.
So I think that they're going to be able to draw not only from that Atlanta market, they're going to be able to pull in from other places. And I think there is a market around there. It's just how they're going to sell it.
That's a interesting thing to note, because again, the idea, and I said, Atlanta is the regional hub of the Southeast. I mean, until you get down into central southern Florida, Atlanta is sort of the center of the universe. And you said there were people from Alabama and people from South Carolina that traveled to this event?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I traveled 4 hours. I had some friends who came down from Greenville, South Carolina, which is about 2 hours away. And I know there were people from other places as well. I mean, Atlanta, as you said, it's the hub of the Southeast. It's the hub of that area where you can get from Birmingham or Chattanooga or Charlotte or Greenville or even Jacksonville in a decent amount of time. So if they're able to pull in people from those markets as well as the Atlanta market, they could do something. Mm-hmm. It's just whether or not people believe in Blank, and it seems that from the people I talked to yesterday, they do believe in Blank. They have a strong feeling that he's going to do well. I'm a Revolution fan, and a bunch of the Terminus Legion guys were giving me crap yesterday about the fact that, well, at least we have Arthur Blank who actually cares on my craft.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think any comparison of the two is questionable simply because there are so many, again, there's so many variables at play. We don't know that Arthur Blank's going to be better than Robert Kraft, but we also don't know that he's going to be worse or the same either. And just because they're both NFL owners and just because they're putting the team in an NFL stadium doesn't mean that one will be like the other. I mean, if you want to draw a parallel that is closer, it's probably the Sounders, but no one expects Atlanta to come out of the gates filling that place up. And that's a good question here, Abram. And I don't know that you're going to get a sense of it from the event yesterday, but that lower bowl with the house reduction technology or whatever the hell that is going to be 29,500 people. They're not drawing 29.5.
I don't think so. I've been asked by a couple of people before what I think would be a decent number. I think if they're able to pull anywhere from 16 to 18 a game, that should be viewed as very successful.
I agree.
That should be viewed as a very successful job by them, even if it's only 16. Mm-hmm. If they pull 29, if they somehow do the magic and pull in 29 a game, I mean, that's a quill in Don Garber's hat. That's probably the biggest success in the history of Major League Soccer, even bigger than Seattle. Absolutely.
I mean, well, the degree of difficulty here is admittedly tougher. Although, let's go back to 2009. Nobody necessarily knew that the Sounders, or 2008 when they really got everything going, nobody knew that the Sounders were going to come out of the gates and draw 30,000 people. That was not expected necessarily. They had their own lower division history. Anyway, I'm not saying that Atlanta's going to be Seattle. I'm just saying that let's not jump to conclusions so we see what happens. And again, this is so much about what Blank brings to the table. And that was a distinct feeling across the crowd was, we love Arthur. I mean, there was an Uncle Arthur chant at the press event.
At the post party when he was sitting with Don Garber, before he even got to talk, the entire bar burst out into Uncle Arthur for about a minute and a half.
That's pretty good. That's a good sign, don't you think?
Yeah, I would say that was, and that's the thing that's making me feel the most positive about it is sort of the reaction between the Terminus Legion and what they're doing and what they're drawing in, and the relationship they seem to have so far with Arthur Blank. And if that ends up turning into something, anything, if it turns into that 16 to 18,000 number a game, good for them. Great for them. I still have questions on whether it'll work or not, but yesterday left me with a little bit, slightly more positive feeling after the after party because the event itself was very underwhelming.
So what was the after party? What was the vibe? Did you talk to anybody who maybe had a soccer story to tell? Was there, what are we talking about a wide base that they'll be drawing from? Because, look, again, there are some beliefs here, some stereotypes. The South doesn't like soccer and, blah, blah, blah. They have to get the Hispanic mark. I mean, what was the cross section here?
It was a good mix. I mean, Atlanta is it's a pretty diverse city. It's highly African-American. It's, for the most part, the city proper is African-American. I would say the people in the bar, it was probably, and I always go with this number, a third, and a third.
A third of what?
A third white, a third Hispanic, and a third African-American, a couple other people mixed in all together. I think they're going to be able to pull a diverse crowd. And that's going to be good for them because that's the type of city that Atlanta is.
Absolutely. And again, I think that when we talk about soccer, one of the things people want out of soccer that maybe doesn't get, it maybe isn't involved in the NFL, particularly when we're talking about a town that has had a love-hate relationship with their team the way Atlanta has. It's been good for a while now with Arthur Blank at the helm, but this is not a team that was always that important in the city. they want the culture of the city to be reflected in the club. Did anybody mention that? How do you do that in a town like in Atlanta, which is just like the rest of the country, changing dramatically, but has all of these cultural elements that make it a very rich city for that kind of thing.
Well, and that's it. That's the question that I kept coming to myself. Atlanta is very much a transplant city. And I was making note of it yesterday when I was counting the different MLS jerseys around there. There were Revs jerseys, there were Sounders jerseys, there were Timbers jerseys, there were Chicago Fire jerseys. There are a few other things, and I just kept saying to myself over and over again, are you going to be able to attract these fans? I mean, I'm driving 4 hours from Alabama. I'll definitely go up for the few times that the Revolution are there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the people that are Fire fans are going to come up for the few games that the Fire are there. I'm sure if the Sounders come, they're going to draw well. But the question is, can you make those fans? Because we're at that point where you have an MLS team who you grew up with in a lot of cases. Are you going to be able to turn those fans in this highly transient city into people who are going to come out every day, every weekend, and on Wednesdays to support an MLS team for that city?
That's interesting. I mean, I guess the supposition there is that soccer fans in that town already have a team, and that you either have to transform them or get them to come out even if their team's not showing up. But did you get any sense that there are sort of unattached MLS type soccer fans? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was talking with one guy outside in the pre-party, the pre-event. I don't know what I'm calling that. But I was talking to one who said, well, I've always been an Arsenal fan, and then I was a Red Bull fan because of Henry, but now I have a team to support. And I think there are those people there as well who are going to support that team. I just don't know the number of them. All
right, fair enough. Fair enough. And look, like any other sort of cosmopolitan city, I'm sure Atlanta has a host of soccer fans who go out to the pub on Saturday morning and drink their pints and root for their lads. I'm sure that happens.
Yeah. And it's just, again, that's a TAB market that MLS is still having difficulty cracking. Is, are we going to be able to get them to come out to support the local team and give up that Saturday morning or top off their Saturday morning with a Saturday night?
There's some question there. All right. Well, if you had to kind of put kind of sum up the day and give me I don't know if I want you to grade it, but clearly, give me some kind of idea of how you felt when you got there and then how you felt when you left as to the prospects of Atlanta getting an MLS team.
I was highly skeptical going in. On a scale from 1 to 10 going in, I was probably at about a 3. Following everything, following sort of the overall good feeling, following the after party, the love that there is for author blanks, I'm more of maybe a 5 or a 6.
Okay.
Now, I'm a very skeptical person in general, so a 5 or a 6 might equate to maybe a 7 or an 8. I think they'll do fine. I just don't know if we're going to expect Seattle numbers out of them, which is sort of unreachable. If they get anything close to, and I'm going to go back to that 16 to 18 number, it's a huge success. And I think they do have the ability to pull that off, especially if they market themselves as a regional team and not just an Atlanta team.
Now, Blank did kind of give the idea. He said something about talking to the fans about the logo and the name, and I get that. And he mentioned talking to them about this color scheme and then mentioned the color scheme. So I guess we're going with red, gold, maybe black. Is that what – did you get any sense of that? Go ahead.
I got the scarf. The scarf I have is it's red and gold. I don't know if you're aware of the Birmingham Hammers. It's the exact same colors that they have.
Okay. All right. Well, I wonder how that'll go over in Birmingham.
Yeah, I do too.
All right. Well, and then, again, there's a long road to go here. They're not starting up until 2017. There's a lot of leeway or a lot of lead time here. Abram, why don't you plug some stuff, let people know where they can find your work?
All right, so I'm on Twitter. I'm at Mind of Abram. Every now and then I write for Viva La Football or the Bent Musket. I podcast on the First 11 podcast. That's at First 11 Pod. It's sort of a sarcastic, satirical soccer take on PTI.
All right, and that's it. That's where you're going to tell. That's all. There's nothing else?
Yeah, that's all. I got nothing else.
Okay,
I got nothing else.
All right, you have. I thought you had like 12 different podcasts you do, but maybe you don't.
Yeah, it's just one. Well, you know what? I'll be on another one called Pickup Soccer this weekend, which I guess I do as well, which is at the Pickup Soccer. I'll be on that this weekend, probably doing some more talk on the Atlanta experience.
Okay.
And talking a little bit about the Confederate flag.
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't want to get into that today. I am about to talk about Massive City FFC and that gentleman's shot across the Atlanta bow. with the Sherman
And
picture.
I say good for Massive FC. Good for them.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to move into that now. Thanks for your time, Abram. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, best of luck. Abram Chamberlain, Mind of Abram on Twitter. Good guy. Yeah, as he said, he's a cynic. He's a skeptic. He's a sarcastic guy. I thought that was actually a good kind of base to get a sense of what happened in Atlanta. I mean, I could talk to people from Atlanta. You guys want to call in 347-756-6276. I've got some time before we grab Thomas Floyd. But that'll probably be a lot of, rah, we're going to be great. This is going to be fantastic. And that's fine, too. That absolutely needs to happen. There needs to be enthusiasm for this to work in Atlanta. But it can't be all about that. We need to get a different perspective. So Abram drove up from Mobile to Atlanta, got a taste of the action there as MLS was announced in the ATL. And let me move to this thing that happened yesterday with Massive City FFC, which is, I'm being told, one guy, basically. It seems like it would be a supporters group. It's not a supporters group. It's basically one guy. I don't know who he is. I haven't looked into that. I don't think it's a secret, but I haven't looked into it. I'm sure somebody from Columbus can tell me right now. Well, what this gentleman did, if you haven't seen it, and maybe you missed Twitter, I don't know. He put a picture of William Tecumseh Sherman and said, welcome to MLS from the people of Ohio, or something like that. I don't have it in front of me. That's the sense. I mean, that's the gist of it. Picture of Sherman. Now, this is obviously related to Sherman and Sherman's march and the burning of Atlanta and everything else. Okay, so you can have questions over whether or not that's appropriate. Now, because Sherman is from Ohio, that's why it was done. You have questions over whether or not it's appropriate. I certainly had some Southerners come at me on Twitter yesterday. We should be angry about this, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I can't rise to that level. I'm not a Southerner. I have Southern family and Southern roots, and I lived in the South, but I'm not. I don't see why this is something you would get upset about from the Civil War 160, 70 years ago. But whatever. But this is the funny thing. It made Keith Olbermann's show last night. Keith Olbermann named Columbus Crew fans, because I don't think he was aware that this was basically one guy. He named Columbus Crew fans the worst persons in the sports world because of this image. Now, I don't think it was because he thought it was inappropriate based on the tragedy of what Sherman did on his march to the sea. I don't think that was the issue. If you watch Olbermann's segment, his main beef is that Sherman left Ohio at the age of 16 to go to military school or the military academy and never went back, and ended up living in New York and being buried in St. Louis. For Olbermann, it was about the history being not quite good enough. Oh, you can't claim Sherman, Ohio, apparently, because he was only there for 16 years. Something like that. I do find it fascinating that people are wondering if this is going to develop into a rivalry now. The Crew, because one guy photoshopped Sherman in a message to Atlanta, whether or not they're going to be rivals now. The Crew and whatever the Atlanta team, though, that would be an odd rivalry. And Atlanta needs rivals. I mean, I'm sure they'll form one with Orlando. I'm sure they'll have one with Miami when that team comes in, just as a general Southeast thing. Maybe DC United, because those cities are, about as geographically goes. How far is Columbus from Atlanta? We need to know that. And the thing about Atlanta, it's gonna be great, is because it's an air hub. Lots of people are gonna be able to get there. Now, I don't know how cheap it'll be, but you'll be able to get there pretty easily. I'm sure the away support at Atlanta whatever games will be decent. And again, I can't 567 miles. Okay. I can't get worked up from the human. I just can't do that. I'm not trying to minimize the deaths that were caused by Sherman's army as he marched. I'm not minimizing that. Again, war is terrible, period. War is bad. Now, in the aftermath of that war, and considering what was at stake during that war, I don't think anybody is necessarily saying, holding William Tecumseh Sherman up as a war criminal. He may have committed war crimes, but history, I'm sorry, isn't on the side of Atlanta in this deal. And that's why people aren't worked up. That's why people aren't upset. And maybe Southerners have a right to be. I don't know. I'm sure there are millions and millions of Southerners who are perfectly okay with the way Sherman went about his business, if it meant ending that war and the USA winning the war. The fascinating thing about this is I really did not expect. I know Atlanta is sort of the pride of the South, and it has a deep history when it comes to the Civil War and those elements. Again, 160 years ago. But I really didn't expect the Civil War element to be playing such a big role right now in the MLS launch of this team. I don't know. I just didn't expect that. It's an odd element to be at play here. And as Abram said, yeah, there's some things that sort of, whenever the South comes up, it's whatever. It gets sticky. It's about heritage. Okay, sure. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to grab our friend Thomas Floyd from Open Wide from Some Soccer from Goal.com. He'll talk to us about the Red Bulls getting their first win last night. We'll go over MLS in general. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Please go to soccermorning.com. Help support the show. Be right back.
Flashcards.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Probably should have started that song a little bit later. Brian Elmore picked the music today. Thanks, Brian. Joining me now on the phone, or I'm sorry, via Skype. We had a shift there. Thomas Floyd. You can hear him on Open Wide for Some Soccer, which is on NASN. You can also read his work at Goal. Thomas, how are you, sir?
I am good. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. It's an interesting day in the American soccer. It's an interesting day in soccer. Period.
It is.
We had yesterday was great. I got to watch. I watched Premier League. I watched the Copa del Rey. I watched MLS last night. New York Red Bulls finally get a win in the new season against the Philadelphia Union 2-1 at Red Bull Arena. That's got to be a big weight off the back of the Supporter Shield winner from last year.
Absolutely. I spoke to Mike Petke when he was down here in D.C. and a few days ago when they lost to United in a game they thoroughly dominated but just couldn't find the back of the net, and that made it 6 winless to start the season. And you could tell he basically said that they weren't ready to hit the panic button, but they could feel the uneasiness starting to creep in, and it was starting to get into their heads that they had gone this long without getting a winning result. And yeah, you could tell that last night to get that monkey off their backs and to get those 3 points was a big boost for them.
Now, the Union had started pretty well. I mean, obviously a new look team for them, but this New York team had, I think, so many of their issues was sort of a lack of consistency. You know, some guys aren't going to play on turf, and you had injuries and everything else. They got most of their team. I'm looking here because I want to make sure. It looked like they had their full complement of players on the field. I mean, maybe you can argue about where some of these guys are lined up, but when you eventually get Tim Cahill on the field and you have Thierry Henry scoring a goal, that's the Red Bulls that are going to be good enough to challenge again for first place in the East.
Yes, definitely. Tim Cahill, I think, is the big factor there. When he's not on the field, they're just not the same team. And you could tell yesterday when he came on as a sub, it was an immediate impact. He just offers them this aerial presence that adds a different dynamic. He gives them grit, working defensively. He also has the versatility to play up top or in central midfield, and that gives Petke more options as he tries to figure out, who he wants in that attack, whether it's Loyandola or Wright Phillips or Johnny Steele. He can afford to shift some of those guys to the bench and improve his depth when Cahill is in there. So I really do think he's the big difference maker for the Red Bulls. And if he's back and healthy, then the results are going to start coming in for them.
And he's the heart of that. I mean, you saw it when Sam scores the goal score when Sam scores on the header and Cahill's going up for the same ball. And it's the celebration tells you all you need to know about what Tim Cahill means just to the spirit of that team as they try to get this thing started for real.
Right. Cahill basically tackled Sam. You could tell he was just ecstatic to get that goal. And yeah, Cahill is the heart of that team. I think everyone who follows the club would agree with that. And he makes such a big difference when he's out there. And you can tell that it rubs off on everyone else around him. When he comes in, all the other players have a little bit more energy and they're going into tackles, maybe they would hold off on otherwise. That it's just, it rubs off, and it's good to see that he has this effect on the team.
I picked before the season, Thomas. I picked Eric Alexander to have something of a breakout year. I don't know how old he is exactly, 25, 26. So you could argue it's a little late for that kind of thing. But I think the guy's got obvious talent, and it's never really come together for him. Either he is in and out of the lineup or there's not a defined position for him. He ends up playing outside midfield last night for the Red Bulls and was crucial to what they did. Are we going to see something out of Eric Alexander, or am I deluding myself and thinking that he's got the talent to be a difference maker?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. The thing with Alexander, of course, has been consistency, and a lot of that does end up being attributed to the fact that he's switching back and forth between a wing role or a holding midfield role, and what the best spot for him remains a question mark. I do think he's someone who, if he can find the consistency and get those regular minutes and just figure out the way to take it up a notch and be in there game in, game out, contributing, getting into the attack, playing some of those clever balls that he can be known for, and also he's a pretty good finisher as well. If he starts pinching into the attack and finding himself in good spots in the attacking third, I could definitely see him doing that. The issue is the Rebels do have a decent amount of depth at outside midfield. You have Johnny Steele competing for those spots, Lloyd Sam, Bobby Convey, who's currently out injured. So there is a lot of competition for him to deal with.
Now let's flip it to the other side. Let's talk about the Union. This again, sort of a new look team. They obviously made that trade for McInerney. McInerney going to Montreal for Andrew Winger. Winger has, if I'm not mistaken, started every game he's been available for since he joined the club. How do you sort of assess where they are? I mean, I'm not sure that they played a bad game last night, but this is a work in progress, and we have to judge it at every milepost possible.
I'm quite impressed with the Union. I think the improvements they made to their midfield are extremely important. Nogueira, I thought, was fantastic last night, and he's been quite good for them lately. He slips in these really smart balls into the box to hit the forwards. He also can hit the crossfield switch with accuracy. He just gives them a different dynamic that they didn't have last year when they were relying more on grinding out results and seeing if someone like McInerney could poach a goal. Now they're playing more attractive soccer. Maidana and, of course, Maurice Adu are a factor there as well. I am curious to see how Wenger does, because that will be important. They do need that finisher to get on the end of these chances, and he didn't always have the consistency in Montreal to be that player. So it will be interesting to see whether Wenger can, in this system with this team back home, if he can become the player we expected when he was the top pick. You
mentioned Nogueira. They have Maidana that they brought in. Obviously, Maurice Adu is a big addition. I'm interested in Hackworth's selection choices. I mean, Brian Carroll gets moved to the bench. I know some of this is fixture congestion. Some of it's just the schedule making it tough for these guys to play game in, game out. But, when you look at Brian Carroll, who's been a fixture on the bench, and then Shannon Williams has not yet worked his way back into this lineup after being injured to start the year. Austin Berry came over from Chicago. He's on the bench. Is he carrying a knock, or is this an issue of him sort of being pushed out of the lineup in favor of Wheeler, who has been questionable at best in my mind? I mean,
right.
And then, obviously, and I mentioned Shannon Williams. Ray Gaddis has played very well so far this season. Is Williams on sort of in limbo? Look, he's a starter. I get it, but I mean, how do you work in Gaddis, who's been pretty good so far?
Well, for those outside back spots, in my opinion, I think Shannon Williams is the best right back in MLS when he is healthy and in form. I believe that when he's back, they probably shift Gaddis over the left back, where he played for long stretches last season.
Well, what does that mean for Fabinho, who was a sort of a big get last year?
Right. I think Fabinho is, ideally, I think they brought him in thinking he could be the starting left back, but he's a little iffy defensively, goes in for some tackles they shouldn't, and sometimes he has sloppy touches or passes that can result in counterattacks. I know he had a really bad one last night that led to Lloyd Sam being able to collect the ball and take it to the corner and draw a foul, and it cost the Union several minutes as they tried to get an equalizer. I think Gaddis is probably the option there, and in that case, maybe Fabinho starts getting minutes higher up the field, because he did play a lot of wide midfield last season.
Sure.
In terms of the other players, I do think it was mostly just squad rotation with this 3 games in 8 days. I think Barry has had some growing pains as he's been growing accustomed to a new backline, a new team, and maybe that's why he's the guy who gets cycled out when you're resting players, and Akugo is the guy who's staying in there for all 3 matches of this stretch. And and the same with Maidana. I think he's not quite there yet where he's a guy who's a game in, game out automatic starter. So when you're doing this busy stretch, it makes sense for Hackworth to just rotate in some different guys and make sure that their lineup is fresh.
So the Red Bulls get their first win of the year at home over the Philadelphia Union. We'll see if this sets the New York team off on a solid run. I have to look ahead to their schedule. Obviously, a midweek game is sort of odd in the MLS world. You never know what you're going to get. And as you mentioned, squad rotation plays a role in this. As we look at the way things have fleshed out so far to this point, Thomas, you know, the Union are right there in the 5th, 6th spot with the Revolution. DC United has put together a couple of good wins and has climbed up the table a little bit. We've seen what the Crew have done. Do you have a sense of the East yet? Is it possible to pin anything down? Because until the Red Bulls won, it felt like the season hadn't really even started, and we don't know who's going to be good and who's not in the East.
I think at this point we've probably identified a couple of teams in the East that we can tell won't be competing for playoff spots.
Right.
And I would say that's Chicago and Montreal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But at that point, that still leaves you 8 teams that look very much like they are ready to be in the competition for those 5 playoff slots, and it is tough to tell. I mean, it's very congested. The Red Bulls with their they were winless going into last night. Now they are tied for what would be the final playoff slot. Obviously, we're very early in the season, so it just shows you how quickly things can turn around. And maybe that's even the case for a team like Chicago or Montreal. It's I look at the teams. Toronto, I think when they have everyone back, they're going to be toward the top. Kansas City is reliable, and then I'd say past those 2, there's a lot of question marks. I'd say Columbus. I've been really impressed with the turnaround they've done, but I also think there's some question marks surrounding their role players. I think they have a very good core with guys like Parkhurst and Will Trapp and Higuain, spread out throughout the lineup, but some of the supporting cast I think is a little iffy, and it wouldn't surprise me if Columbus had a little bit of a letdown after this hot start to the season. So it definitely is hard to tell which teams will emerge and which teams will end up fading as this season goes on.
Well, you mentioned Toronto and you mentioned Sporting, and yes, I think Sporting is going to be good, and I have no reason to doubt them, and obviously defending MLS Cup champions, and I think Toronto, when they have all their best players on the field, are a good team. But the question is, how will these teams navigate that stretch where they're going to be missing guys? Because Bradley's going to leave Toronto to go to the World Cup team. Zusi's going to leave. Matt Beasler is going to leave. Columbus probably only has Parkhurst to deal with, and then perhaps some of their Costa Ricans, which, how important are they, and can they overcome those issues? I mean, that makes it so hard to handicap this.
Yes, it definitely does. I guess MLS going on that 2-week hiatus during the World Cup to kind of soften the blow does make it a little easier for those teams. But you're right, they will be about a month without those players, and it's hard to tell. Kansas City last year did show a knack for getting results when their players went on international duty. It
doesn't help Kansas City that they've lost. Why am I blanking?
Apara.
Oh yeah, Ike Apara for a long. I don't even know if that's the season or not for him. I know he's had surgery. He's definitely out. That doesn't help them. He was supposed to be their cover.
Yes, that is a tough blow. It's and that will be problematic. He obviously was a player that they were counting on leaning on when Beasler went to the World Cup, and he was someone who they felt comfortable with in the CONCACAF Champions League, starting over Colin. So that is a big loss. But I do think whoever they do plug into that back line, that defense is such a well-oiled machine with Colin and Myers and Sinovic just being in there and being together for several years at this point, that as important as Matt Beasler is to that team, I think they can figure it out in his absence. But that's my opinion. It also wouldn't surprise me if it did go the other way, and that the injury to Opara was a big blow to their depth.
All right, Thomas, you've identified 8 teams vying for 5 spots in the East, and look, I don't know how good DC United is going to be for real over the course of the whole campaign, and there are obviously going to be questions about consistency for some of these teams, but everybody else looks fairly at least legit to try for a playoff spot, whether they're that good or not. I mean, especially compared to the West. Let's look at the West. Is there even one team in the West where you say, I don't see them even trying for a playoff spot? I'm not sure there is. I think even Chivas USA has a shot.
Yeah, Chivas, the McNamara injury obviously is a big blow for them, but And I do think that if you were to pick one, it would be Chivas. But I also think you're right. I wouldn't be surprised if they, stayed in this race a lot longer than people would have expected them to when making their preseason predictions. Even a team like San Jose, who's sitting in last place right now on 2 points, they've played less games than everyone else because of their Champions League obligations, and also their offseason signings, Gorlitz and Zhao are starting to get into the mix, and we're starting to see the San Jose team that was envisioned when that front office put together the roster during the offseason. And the Timbers, of course, are down there toward the bottom too. And I think most people who follow MLS think it's just a matter of time before they find their stride and get into the rhythm that we saw last season when they were able to play a more attractive possession style of soccer and just get all those results. So the West is very competitive, and I'm excited to see how that race goes as the season goes on.
Certainly, it's way too early to be down on the Timbers as a possible contender for a playoff spot at the very least, and you can even see them making a run and getting back to where they were last year. But you also have the possibility of these teams cannibalizing each other for points, Thomas, and that's going to be interesting when we talk about, eventual seeding and supporter shield and who ends up hosting the MLS Cup. That's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, that's that played into it last season when Sporting Kansas City got to host MLS Cup, largely because the Eastern Conference wasn't quite as strong as the West, and they were able to get the results that some of these teams out west that weren't getting, and that definitely will come into this as the season goes on. And I think it's safe to say that the top teams in the East will probably have more points than the top teams in the West. And with that MLS Cup home field advantage, we've seen every season thus far they've done it. The home team has won the cup. So it's obviously a huge advantage. And I do think the East could be maybe a little better than we're giving them credit for, because I could see a team like Chicago, who I was counting out earlier. If Mike McGee gets hot again, maybe they're a stronger team than we expected. And MLS is so unpredictable in general that it's even at this point that we've had a good month and a half to look at these teams. You never know who's going to emerge. I think this time last year, Montreal looked unbeatable, and the Fire were in last place, and then look at how the season ended. Montreal just teetered out, and Chicago made this incredible run where they had, I want to say, the best record in MLS, like after Mike McGee came over. So it's maybe a team will make a move like that and completely change the picture. You never know with MLS.
Thomas Floyd from Goal, from Open Wide for Some Soccer, the Twitter handle Thomas Floyd 10, is that right?
That is right.
All right. Go follow Thomas and get all your MLS stuff from him and U.S. national team, all that stuff. Let's take a break. When we come back, Tim Vickery will join us. Let's talk South American soccer, Copa Libertadores, Brazil. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Thanks again to Brian Elmore for this musical selection today, supporting the show, soccermorning.com. On the phone with me now from jolly old England, Tim Vickery. Good to have Tim back. How are you, Tim?
I'm a little bit cold, quite frankly.
Are you?
I've just been in England since Sunday night. And I've discovered that in this frozen island, you have to wear socks in bed just to get you through the night. So I'm struggling.
It's a bit of a shock every time you go back, I imagine?
Well, usually I'm a bit brighter about things. I go back in the English summer. And it's at the time where it's pitch black in Brazil by 5:30. So I love then coming back and seeing the temperatures in London edge out the temperatures in Rio and daylight until 9:30 at night. But this time I think I might have made a schoolboy.
Seem to have lost Tim there. You still with me, Tim?
Yeah,
okay,
still here.
So dropped out there at the end. I think Southern Hemisphere winter. It slips the mind sometimes when you live in the Northern Hemisphere. We're in we've got Tim because we're in the round of 16 with the Copa Libertadores, and we thought we'd have a chat with him about where things stand in that championship. Tim, how does the, especially in Brazil, how is the Copa Libertadores viewed in this particular year with everything building up to the World Cup?
It's increasingly important, I think, for Brazilian clubs. And you can see this from the fact that in the group stage of the competition, the two teams that put most bums on seats, that got most people buying tickets, were Flamengo and Botafogo, two Rio teams. Meanwhile, their own local games in the Rio State Championship, you were struggling to get enough supporters in there to fill a Range Rover, but they were comfortably getting 40,000 a game for their Libertadores matches. So the fact that both of these teams crashed out of the competition, along with another Brazilian team, Atlético Paranaense, this is a worry for Brazilian football because the Brazilian clubs are looking around the continent and they're thinking, well, we've got so much more money than the teams from elsewhere in South America. We pay so much higher salaries, and yet we can't seem to really make this count on the field. I know Brazil have won the last 4 editions of the Libertadores, but the domination that you might expect from the financial advantage that Brazilian football has, that domination simply isn't happening.
That's interesting. I spoke to one of our regular guests who covers Mexican soccer, and obviously you have Mexican teams in this competition on an annual basis. And I asked him, how does Mexican payroll, wage bills, how does that compare with the competition in the Copa Libertadores? And I suppose Mexico is on the high end of that scale?
Well, very, very much so. And hence the fact that Mexico is a big importer of South American talent. I think the Mexicans often feel in the Libertadores that they don't really get a fair run of play, that because they are intruders, and because if they win the competition, they will not represent South America in the World Club Cup, because Mexico is a long, long way from South America. Yes. But I think that there's a feeling amongst the Mexicans that, all right, they bring their money and they bring their TV audience, but they don't really get a fair crack of the whip in the competition. Well, both of their sides have managed to get through to this knockout stage. Leon have some difficult work to do, though, after only drawing 2-2 at home to Bolivar, who are a surprise side in this year's Libertadores, who next week in a return game have the advantage of 3,600 meters of altitude, La Paz. The Santos Laguna will feel a little bit happier about things, despite shipping a goal right at the end that condemned them to a 2-1 defeat to Lanús of Argentina. But I think they'll feel relatively happy about the possibility of overturning that scoreline in the second leg, especially with the South American talent they have. And the one standout for me, he's been one of my favourite players for a while, Colombian striker who scored a terrific goal last night, the scientist of the goal, Carlos Darwin Quintero, who it's always a surprise to me that he isn't a regular in the Colombia squad.
You wonder about that. I mean, the Colombia squad is obviously rich in attacking talent, and even with Falcao out, that they have options there. But Quintero he can score some amazing goals. A fantastic player. To shift it away from the Mexican sides, which in my part of the world will get the attention in this competition. You mentioned Brazilian teams not bringing their riches to bear, so to speak, at least relatively speaking. Where is, besides Bolivar, where are the surprise teams in this portion of the competition?
Well, without doubt, the Bolivian pair, Bolivar and the Strongest. And this is the first time since 1997 that Bolivia has got two teams through to the knockout stage. And back in 1997, it was much, much easier to qualify from the group phase because of the four teams in those days, three went through. These days, of the four teams, only two go through. Bolivia, nothing in the Libertadores in this century. And since Bolivar reached the quarterfinals in 2000, only once ever has a Bolivian team qualified for the second round, which was Bolivar a couple of years ago when they ended up losing 8-0 to Santos of Brazil. So to have two Bolivian sides together is remarkable. And the Strongest have done it more, I think, on the basis of altitude, winning their home games, and being in a relatively weak group. Bolivar have done it playing away from home. During the group phase, they drew with Flamengo in the Maracanã in Rio. They beat Leon of Mexico in the group phase, and then they came just a few seconds from beating Leon again last night. So Bolivar's performances away from home, I think, have been the biggest surprise. Compact, modern, difficult to break down, retaining possession. They've been the biggest surprise, along perhaps with the side who the other Bolivian team will meet shortly, Defensor of Uruguay, who travel to face the Strongest in their first leg in a few hours' time. And Defensor are a relatively small team in Uruguay. They're much, much smaller than the two Montevideo giants, Peñarol and Nacional, both of whom crashed out in the group phase. So for them to fall and for Defensor to make progress, and Defensor took 4 points off Cruzeiro, the Brazilian champions. So I think they're up there with the surprises this year as well.
Is there a sense that while perhaps Brazilian teams have the financial might and whatever Mexico brings to the competition, is there a sense that there is a more parity among the other nations, sort of the secondary nations? Obviously, Argentina has had issues with finances in the recent past, but they're always going to present strong opposition. Are these other nations? I mean, Bolivia. Well, obviously Uruguay is a power internationally, but how often do their teams progress to the point where you could consider them possible champions?
Not too often these days. I mean, the last time that a Uruguayan side won the Libertadores is way back in 1988, and between 1989 and 2009, they didn't even get a semi-finalist. So once the global market opens up, it's very hard for a nation like Uruguay with a population of little over 3 million. So then it becomes impossible for Uruguayan football to hang on to its best talents. On this Defensor side that we're talking about, a lot of their success so far this year has been based on a couple of very promising young players. Arrascaeta, who was one of the successes in the World Under-20 Cup last year, well, he's already been sold. So at the end of this season, he will move on. Another one, Felipe Jadot, a young Brazilian, he's in the shop window as well. So that's been the way it's been for Uruguayan sides in recent years. If a team comes through and shows promise, you can guarantee that team will be asset stripped and its best players will quickly move on to somewhere where they can earn more money.
It's interesting. Whenever I talk about South American football, the notion of the talent drain, particularly in countries where sales of players drive the economy of the clubs for the most part, Argentina, and I'm sure Uruguay is very much like this. How much does the Copa Libertadores take on a different element if you have a team or a nation with a couple of successful clubs who are presenting some of their bigger internationals with those sides?
Well, you can more or less guarantee that it's not going to be there for very long. That's a huge difference between the Libertadores and the Champions League. Is the lack of continuity of clubs in the Libertadores, because even a big Brazilian club side, who, as we were saying, they're now paying far higher wages. But if they win the Libertadores, they're guaranteed to lose some of their best players as well. And the surprise was maybe when Santos won the competition with Neymar in 2011. So the surprise was that Neymar stayed an extra 2 years, that he didn't move then. And this means that the Libertadores, it doesn't have the consolidated quality of the Champions League. You're always saying goodbye to your best players. But in comparison, it also means that the Libertadores has that extra unpredictability factor. You never exactly know which side is going to come through strongly, whereas at the start of the Champions League, you more or less know who are the runners, who are the riders, who's going to be there at the business end. The Libertadores always has that extra air of unpredictability. I suppose that's the price you pay for having a little less quality. The Libertadores will always be very competitive. Sometimes, though, it's a little bit like a kind of the gunfight at the fair to middling corral. It's competitive because the quality isn't quite there, enabling the big sides to consistently differentiate themselves from the rest.
It is interesting. You're always getting a different group towards the end. And there are a couple of clubs I'm sure are relatively consistent, but I mean, last year's champion, still in this competition, but are they a favorite at this point? Mineiro, are they in this competition still? Apologies, I'm catching up here.
Yes, they are. They face a difficult second-round tie, home and away against Atlético Nacional of Colombia, who are one of the most interesting sides in the Libertadores. Their coach, you might remember Juan Carlos Osorio from Major League Soccer.
I do.
And he spent time on the coaching staff of Manchester City a few years ago.
Yes.
He's a very, very interesting coach who's fashioning an interesting side there. Atlético Nacional, in order to guarantee their place, they had to win away to Newell's Old Boys of Argentina, who are one of the strongest sides in the competition. They did that, eliminated Newell's Old Boys, and now with their morale flying, they take on home and away Atlético Mineiro, the reigning champions. Now, Atlético Mineiro were in a relatively easy group, and I don't think they've fully been tested yet in the Libertadores. I think we're going to find out plenty more about the 2014 model Atlético Mineiro in these next couple of weeks, home and away against Atlético Nacional of Medellin in Colombia.
Tim Vickery joining us to talk a little Copa Libertadores. Tim, I appreciate your time. I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for joining us today. Follow Tim on Twitter. Are you tweeting regularly, Tim?
I am, yeah. It took me a while.
Right.
I'm a little bit technologically challenged. It took me a while to get the hang of it, but I'm really enjoying it now. Right. So yeah, get involved, follow, ask questions. You might never get an answer, but I'll have a look anyway.
There you go, Tim_Vickery on Twitter. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate your time as always, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
There he goes. Tim Vickery, fantastic always to get him on the show. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to grab our friend David Cartledge to talk a little bit about yesterday's Copa del Rey final. Real Madrid getting one over on Barcelona 2-1. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Turf harder than immigrants work. Golf is distant in my shirt. Get up off the pavement, brush the dirt up off my psyche.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined now on the telephone by David Cartledge. Covers Spanish soccer for numerous outlets. You can follow him on Twitter at DavidJACA. David, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you, and I hope you're well, Jason.
I am well. Yesterday was a brilliant day of football from many parts of the world, and one of those parts of the world was Spain, where the Copa del Rey final went off. Real Madrid, Barcelona. Real Madrid comes out on top, and it's the Bale goal that is getting all of the headlines today, David. Look, I mean, the spectacular thing about the goal was how fast Gareth Bale is. Otherwise, it really isn't that notable of a goal, is it?
Yes, I think it is. I think it's extremely significant. I think for Bale, above anything, I actually don't think the club context was that heavy here. It was particularly for Gareth Bale. It was his night. It was his face being beamed across the world. It was just a magnificent moment. I think, as Xabi Alonso said, it will go down in history, in Real Madrid history, as one of the most important, special goal in the history.
Okay, what I mean is, I suppose the context certainly matters, and the context of a Clásico and these two teams playing against each other will always make whatever goal is scored one of the more important goals of the season. And you mentioned that. I mean, for Gareth Bale, who has, he's been okay. I mean, considering the amount of money paid for him, there was a lot of lofty expectations. Mm-hmm. I know there's been some discussion about how his goals have not been important goals, and to get an important goal, that's the headline. I mean, that's the takeaway here.
Oh, definitely. I think he's defined a moment. I think there's such the pressure levels that come with being a Real Madrid player. We're talking £86 million here. The pressure it's unbelievable, and it's not just goals. He needed this moment, I think, to really define himself as a Real Madrid player and say, look, I'm up to this. I'm up to the task. I'm up to fulfilling expectations here. The fact that Ronaldo was in the crowd as well and he couldn't play also increased it more. Bale needed to step up and have that performance, and he certainly did. He had a good game, and then he had that brilliant moment.
And I guess because of Ronaldo's absence, I mean, that was more of the burden on Bale and on the rest of Real Madrid stars, certainly. Is there meaning in them winning that game and lifting that trophy without Ronaldo, who was certainly there and cheerleading and seemed to be as engaged as ever?
Yeah, I think he was. I think that was very natural. I think we really saw the real Ronaldo last night there, and I think a lot said about his persona, but I think he was a young boy supporting his team again last night, and it was brilliant to see. But yeah, I think it was significant for Real Madrid because obviously Ronaldo garners so much of the press, and we said he is their leader now. Casillas' personality perhaps not as big as it once was. Ronaldo is one of the leaders there. Xabi Alonso as well, leader there. Pepe, but Ronaldo is the main man. And last night for them not to do it without him, whereas Barcelona had Messi and struggled with him, it was huge. It was really, really big. And I think the collective of Real Madrid came together superbly last night. People like Isco, excellent, hard-working. Di Maria was wonderful, and Benzema, what a performance, a complete strike. Well, obviously aside from a goal, but the performance from Benzema was just astonishing, I thought.
To flip this over, and maybe we touch on briefly on Real Madrid as they go into the Champions League, but with Barcelona having been knocked out of the Champions League and the struggles, the recent loss in the league, and the questions of whether or not they'll be able to challenge for that, is this a transformative moment? Is something happening at Barcelona that's going to have longer ramifications? I mean, losing to Real Madrid is not the end of the world, but of course they want to win that match, and this was the only trophy left to them, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, quite possibly, yeah. With the league, the way things are there, but I think win or lose, this is it didn't really matter for Barcelona almost, because I think the win would have been a case of papering over cracks that exist, and then now they have lost as well, it becomes a bit more exposed, and something has to be done. Something should have been done after that. The Bayern Munich loss, of course, in the semi-final. That something should have been done then, but it wasn't really. And I think by Bayern, Neymar was a case of addressing that, but it wasn't. The problems are far more deep-seated now in Barcelona. been going on for far too long, and you're going to get results like this, and you get more of them. You get more of these losses. You get like when they lost to Valencia by the lead, things like that. You're going to get more of these results of Barcelona. So something really needs to be done this summer. Whether it will, they've got the same board there who have been there all the time. So you can't see it happening. And it's worrying, I think, for Barcelona at the moment.
Well, you certainly have a black cloud, and the transfer ban still looms. I mean, I understand that there may be there may be an appeal, but it's very possible they won't be able to do anything this summer, except for bringing Ter Stegen if that's a pre-existing deal. What else is there?
Yeah, this is the point. It's a case. It might be a lost year. You know, it might be a case of let's try and build from the foundations we've got with people like De La Feu, with Rafinha, with Bartra, who had a good game last night despite being involved in that moment with Bale where he got completely destroyed, basically. Not being subtle at all there. But yeah, and you know, these people are important for Barcelona, and I think they have to build with them, and then hopefully if that ban does get lifted, then they can bring in players to add to that. But yeah, it's just a very, very difficult time. So many things have gone wrong. I think they've actually could have managed this ban if this ban had arrived, but they had started perhaps their transition earlier in terms of bringing people in like Thiago Silva, the defender, or Marquinhos, and then kept Thiago instead of selling the Bayern. And I think they could have navigated this ban better. But the situation we've got now is it's terrible with the house themselves in.
Real Madrid, obviously a difficult task in the Champions League semifinals, but you give them a puncher's chance at the very least, and Bayern Munich has not shown that they are the juggernaut we thought they might be. Is this a chance? I mean, Real Madrid good enough, and how quickly can Ronaldo get back? And I suppose that after this win, does this have any impact at all on the rest of their season?
Yes, and I think this will have a big, again, with it being without Ronaldo, I think that gives everybody else a huge, huge boost. So when he does come in, that team is set there, and they might actually have, but the sounds are coming out of Spain. It sounds like there is that chance that Ronaldo could miss that first leg. So they might have to draw upon this quality and this togetherness that they experienced yesterday, or they experienced last night. So that could very well be important. But I think it was a massive, massive boost for the team because some people have really upped their game. I think people like Isco, who was fantastic. I think even Carvajal had a better game last night after taking a lot of criticism, I think. So these people have stepped it up and they've reacted. There's no one dragging the heels at Real Madrid at the moment. Everyone is really pulling in the same direction. And Ronaldo can come in and make that even better, come back and make that even better, then it's like, hey, that's brilliant. What is the
fundamental, for people who haven't been paying that close of attention, but what's the fundamental difference in the way Real Madrid are playing now from the Jose Mourinho era?
I think the main thing for me is the clarity of ideas. You can see everybody knows their task, they know their job, they know their duty, they know what part they play in this team, what particular cogs they are. I think with Mourinho, it became other aspects. There was so much going on off the field where I think it started to transfer onto the field, and there was just so much disillusion there. I think even from a tactical point of view, Mourinho perhaps hadn't progressed Real Madrid as he should have. He's a fantastic coach, Mourinho, but I don't think he progressed them that he should have. And that really stifled them. And really hurt them. And I think Ancelotti's come in and he's made everybody feel really important to the cause. And it's not about this character that's bigger than any of the players. You know, it's not about Ronaldo being the biggest character. It's about everybody pulling together. And we saw a culmination of that last night to superb effect. Real Madrid were deserved winners, and they were just fantastic. I thought it was an unbelievable team performance last night, and that's what he's brought, the team environment. Real Madrid of all clubs, the club of individuals almost, it's gone out the window. They're now a team and they're all pulling together, and it's very impressive, I think. Not
an easy task at Real Madrid to make a collection of that talent seem like a cohesive team. They may win things.
Exactly.
They may win things with their talent, but it's not always easy to do that. The only thing that went wrong for Real Madrid yesterday was Ronaldo wearing that hat with that suit. I don't understand what's going on there, David.
Oh, it's a terrible fashion faux pas. I completely agree.
David Cartledge, follow him, David JACA, David Haga on Twitter. He'll update you on all things Spanish soccer. Appreciate your time, David. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thanks for having me.
There he goes. David Cartledge, we have to wrap this edition of Soccer Morning up last couple of minutes here. This is the time where I'll implore you to go check out soccermorning.com, learn how you can help support the show, listener supported. We have we're chugging along. You guys are helping out, and everything that you do for us is everything that you give us is greatly appreciated. There are certainly things that you can interact with the show as a result of your support. We had Scott Rowson on yesterday, sitting in as a guest host. We have music today. Brian Elmore picked all of our music today. I think I'm out of songs. Am I out of songs? Yeah, I'm out of songs from Brian. So thanks to him for his contribution to the show today. Again, soccermorning.com. Soccer Morning on Twitter, iTunes ratings and reviews. Those help out a lot. I don't think I have any other housekeeping items to cover right now. It's Thursday. Looking forward to tomorrow being Friday. Your springs are started, hopefully, in most parts of the United States. It's starting to feel, again, less than 2 months into the World Cup, 57 days into the World Cup. It's coming quickly. We're gonna get our engines running here to cover that event for you at Soccer Morning and NASN. Oh, here's the news: the NASN iPhone app is out. Finally, thankfully. We got that through the process, and that's out. I don't have an iPhone myself. I'm an Android guy. Go ahead, boo me if you want. But for all of you iPhone users out there, there is your app, so you can listen to the show live. You listen to the show live through the app. You can listen to all of the NASN. You listen to the NASN radio feed, essentially, through the app. Check that out in the App Store. I think that's it, right? We good? We had an amazing show today. Abram Chamberlain, Tim Vickery. I'm skipping over our friend Thomas Floyd from Open Wide for some soccer and goal.com. And obviously at the end there, David Cartledge talking Spanish soccer. It's been good. We'll talk more about Atlanta, I'm sure, in the coming days. We'll talk more about what that event means for them. And now that Arthur Blank is officially an MLS owner, what he brings to the table. We've got MLS coming up this weekend. We've got plenty of intrigue in the European leagues. It's gonna be fantastic. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. We will talk to you tomorrow, Friday. Thanks to producer Trevor. Always thank you. Bye.
On the boulevard, I landed. We used to kick routines in the presence was fit.